Hello and welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, No Wrong Choices. I'm Larry Samuels, and I'll be joined in just a moment by Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. This episode features the founder and CEO of genconnectU, Nancy Spears. Before Nancy joins us, please be sure to subscribe, like, or follow No Wrong Choices wherever you're listening. Your support helps us keep bringing these great stories to life. Let's get started. Now joining No Wrong Choices is Nancy Spears. Nancy is the CEO and founder of genconnectU, a digital platform that partners with top experts to create courses focused on professional development, leadership, wellness, and personal growth. Nancy is also the author of Buddha 9 to 5, a book that demonstrates how Buddhist principles can positively impact business and leadership, which is something I very much look forward to exploring. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to all three of you.
I can go through a list to describe you based upon what I've come up with, but nobody knows you better than you. So if you would, to set the stage, please tell us who Nancy Spears is in your own words.
Well, I won't go chronological because we don't have enough time for that. In a nutshell, I've always just seen myself as someone who shares wisdom globally with all different audiences, all different ages. I've got 27-year-old twins who will tell you that I teach them nothing, but hopefully there's some subliminal learning that goes along there. And yeah, I've just been blessed to meet a lot of interesting, creative, brilliant people in my life. And I see myself as a conduit between what they share with me and being able to share that wisdom with other people in the world.
And for genconnectU, because I did mention that off the top, can you just give us a little feel for what your business is and what you do?
Sure. So genconnectU is very much like the masterclass for career, if you will. We've been creating and producing on-demand learning content for 8 years now. GenConnect was the parent company, and then I pivoted to e-learning about 8 years ago. Basically, what we do is we follow trends of what people care about mostly at any given time. And this can be everything from advancing career to health and well-being. We meet brilliant people. We video them in production in studio, broadcast quality, beautiful product. And then we break those lessons down into 3 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minute, and then package them in courses. And we distribute this content across a number of different companies, everything from LinkedIn Learning to Spotify, and then to individual companies like American Express Marketing and Procter & Gamble and companies like that.
Fascinating. I'm a visual learner, so I love that kind of like, tell it to me straight, give me a video and teach me, like a sponge. So I'm sure we're going to get into a ton of that. But I have the fun part. I'm Larry Shea. Really nice to meet you, by the way, as well, Nancy. Thanks for giving us some time. Tell me about your childhood. Let's start at the beginning. Because I just think that our childhoods shape us so much in who we are and what we do. Did yours, I guess, is the first question. Where did you grow up? What was your family life like? And what was the original dream?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very modest family of, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My dad was a police officer. His whole life, I always used to say my mother must have loved men in uniform because my first father was an Air Force colonel. And then my father that raised me was a police officer, and he actually ran the vice squad for the Broward County Sheriff's Department, which,
wow,
made me instantly be afraid of any kind of narcotic since early days. And so, but what really shaped my life was being the oldest and being kind of a role model for my brothers and sisters. And then education was the most important thing to me. I was the only one of 5 that actually did go to college and graduate from university. And that kind of paved the way for my future. Not to say that it's for everyone, but it certainly was a pinnacle part of my life. I think the most important thing was that they let me just be me. So I flourished into areas that I really cared about. My favorite class was creative writing, and still to this day, I write poetry a lot and follow poets. So just always thinking about, I feel like I'm a kid at heart, basically, always looking and exploring and being curious about the next thing.
So, Nancy, I'm Tushar Saxena, by the way, and the non-Larry of the group here. So, your parents obviously wanted you to be the person who, just to be a person, your own person, so to speak. So, did they put an emphasis on education for all of you, or was it just that you seemingly were more focused on your want to gain knowledge?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hardly ever think of this part of my life, by the way. I don't know if you guys are the same, but we kind of put things in containers. But to answer your question, they definitely paved the way for me. I was the only one that was sent early days. I was lucky enough to be the oldest. They put me in private high school right off the bat. It was an experimental school back then called Nova High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that really did. It kind of plunged me into, understanding how critical education was. I was in a very competitive environment. I was very, very shy, and I had to really lean into it and put myself out there on a daily basis in order to accomplish what I wanted to do. It's a great question. Thanks for asking that.
Sure.
And what were your passions at that time? And I guess the curiosity is, what were your passions at that time? And did those somehow shape you or direct you towards the journey that you ultimately took?
Well, the passion for creativity, for exploration, that was huge, for writing. Also, I was early days in Catholic school. And so that, whether, the experience was not as important as just understanding how to follow the rules and how not to follow the rules. And that's kind of what drove me in a different direction when I was able to make my own decisions around my spirituality.
You talked about writing. Is that something that you've always done, even as a younger person at this age?
Yeah, I started writing when I was probably around 9, and I was even published in little local newspapers and stuff like that early on.
Is it self-reflection stuff or growth stuff or, free thought, like free writing? What kind of writing are you practicing at this time at a young age?
Yeah, free writing and things that impacted me. So that's what kind of drove more to the poetry side, but it was really about trying to understand a concept, basically, trying to understand a concept from a different lens, from my own lens.
Where'd you go to college?
So I went to West Virginia University, which I call the Harvard of Appalachia.
Of course.
Was your major there? Was your major there writing?
It was journalism, public relations, communications with an emphasis on writing.
How were you as a writer?
Back then, tenacious, consistent, fairly good. Good enough to graduate.
As you were writing and exploring your creativity, eventually you got into marketing and advertising, I believe, down the road. When did you start to see that as your path forward, or did you? What did you do after graduation? What was that next step for you?
I know it's shocking when you think about it today because I actually worked in what I graduated in. So many people don't do that anymore, unless let's be fair. If you're like my daughter's in her final year of law school at Fordham, so she knows she wants to be a lawyer, but most people graduating in the late 70s, really, they don't know, really, unless it's very specific, like computer programming from Stanford. So I did. I went on to get a PR job for a hotel company, and from there ended up in sales and communications in the hotel business, ended up as director of sales for Westin Hotels, then started my own company that was more branding, marketing, event planning. Got really lucky. Nike was our first client, and we launched the Nike Air shoes. So that was just good karma. And from there, that company did really well. And I ended up working with 10 of the top 12 worldwide Olympic sponsors for many of the games, the Olympic Games, and including Coca-Cola and Swatch and John Hancock. And it's just kind of a plethora of industry, which was also really fun. And then I sold that company to the Interpublic Group when I was pregnant with my twins.
You are lucky enough to speak to two guys who are actually, I'm a Fordham grad, and Larry Samuels actually teaches at Fordham.
What are you going to be teaching?
A business communications course.
Fantastic. Well,
I'm a graduate of Rose Hill 94, so my 4 years there were wonderful. And so when you were in school at that point, obviously you were a very good writer, but you went as a journalism major, something along those lines. Did you see yourself going into journalism at all?
Well, some form of it. So PR, that's journalism light. Sorry for any of my friends who have successful PR companies. I mean, now they have, let's face it, it's so interesting how the industry has just pivoted and shifted in
Yeah.
the age of digital. So back then, when there was not digital, it was very fundamental. And today it's just, there's so many options. Back then, there was not even a event planning degree. And now there's whole schools around that. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating to me. So I think I knew that I always wanted to be in some form of communications.
You mentioned before that you worked with 10 of the, I guess, 12 biggest Olympic sponsors. Is that right? In what capacity? What were you doing?
Yeah, so the Olympic Games, such a money machine. Actually, LA was the first games that were profitable. So they came up with a formula around the top 12 Olympic sponsors. So these are global companies. And so what we did for them was every way we could think of to integrate those rings into their own marketing during the game. So this would be actually pre-contact with a customer through communications, and then on the ground, everything from building out their hospitality suites to branding all of their own events that they were going to host, and then everything that touched it post-event too.
I want to just jump back a little bit because I don't want to gloss over this part. Oftentimes we do this podcast and our guests will say, oh, I got this job and then I got that job and then I started my company. And then it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. How did you do that? This is a career journey podcast. Do you remember how you got some of those first jobs? Was it you answering an ad? Was it somebody you knew? How were you getting those first jobs to get yourself out of college and into the workforce at that time?
Yeah, so this is why I keep talking to my children so much about the value and importance of relationship and networking. And, I do think that the virtual and digital and it's really shifted that so much that people aren't even rubbing shoulders the way they used to in an
Yeah.
event or whatever. And so
Yeah, for
we've
sure.
lost that, human touch. Basically, it was total pure networking. One client referring another, referring another. We were part of started in Atlanta in 1996, and I was very involved with the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. And that was just one sector of the business. So we did a ton in sports. We did a ton in the insurance industry, a ton in pharmaceutical, which actually became my passion point, was to launch pharmacy drugs. We launched everything from Vista, which was the U.S. Women's Health division for Eli Lilly and Company, all the way to gemcitabine, which, was Eli Lilly's oncology drug. So we worked with multiple J&J, Merck, Eli Lilly and Company, GlaxoPharm. And so how we met those people, to answer your question, that's a long way of answering that, is that we would, be referral to referral. Many times it would start at trade shows. So we'd actually go to a trade show and talk to the big exhibitors. And I don't know if people still do that anymore, but that was really a major lead generation for us.
So from that point of where you're actually working within organizations to build out portfolios, so to speak, well, at what point did you come to the determination that I'm going to start my own company?
Oh, that was when I had the company. Prior to that, I was in hotel sales.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where we were.
Yeah, so I was the director of sales at the Westin Peachtree Plaza. And at that time, that was the tallest hotel in the world. And we used to tell people that the elevators actually did work, which they never worked. But otherwise,
That was part of the PR, part of the spin.
that's part of the spin. So that's where the relationship started. Actually, it was our client with Nike, Mary Mize. She said, you should be doing this for yourself. And I thought, oh, why not? And so that's what we did.
So she made the suggestion that pulled you forward into this new universe.
Yes.
And did you just create your own business organically, or did you have a partner? How did you do it?
Initially, I had a partner, and then at some point, I wanted to really grow it, and she wanted to keep it on a different level, a smaller container. So I bought her out and kept on. And eventually, when I got pregnant with the twins, I knew I couldn't live on Delta and United Airlines anymore.
No.
And so I sold it to the Interpublic Group. And then I had a 3-year earn out, but then 9/11 hit. And
Right.
so my twins were in Aspen and I was in Atlanta and said, this isn't good. They were only two. I went back to IPG and renegotiated the deal. But they were a fabulous company to work for. A gentleman named Rick Murray, who's still very prominent in the industry. He was head of all the communications for Golan Harris. And Al Golan was a legend in his time too. He was a good friend. Their first client, I think, was McDonald's. So, and that was part of
Wow.
the IPG company. And so I got
Yeah.
very blessed with meeting the right people at the right time.
How many years did it take you to scale your business
About 12.
to the point where IPG would be interested?
Yeah, it was 12 years.
Wow, what a run.
Yeah. So I don't think there's really 4-year startups or 2-year startups or all of this nonsense. It's 9 to 12, 15 years to really grow a real company.
That's been my experience too.
And it sounds like you didn't have a difficult decision going out on your own. It sounds like you were pretty much, it was lifestyle, circumstance, and you just took that leap of faith. Was there trepidation in the beginning when you were starting that company?
None at all. It was really close your eyes and jump.
Mm.
And we hired that way too. We hired people. My team, they were just so dedicated and would just do anything for the client, for their company. It was really a magical time to see people work together, sometimes into midnight, and not say a word about it. They just wanted to get the work done.
When you become the boss, so to speak, do you have a philosophy when you're creating your own business? Like, these are the kind of people that I want to have working with me. This is the kind of business that we want to put forward to our clients. Is there a real philosophy that you initially come out with when you're throwing your own shingle out there?
Yeah, I think a few things. First of all, you never ask anyone to do something that you can't do yourself or won't do yourself. And so no job is too small or too difficult,
I
So
think it was what Pat Riley once in the book The Winter Within always said, never demean your time in the trenches, right? So that type of idea, right?
yeah, exactly. So that was one. The second was to treat everyone as yourself, as family, regardless of how big. So, this old open door policy, I don't even think that term exists anymore, but it was really true. And the best ideas could come from anyone. And that's still the way that is, I believe. So, really encouraging everyone to speak up and to come up with a great idea. And the people that I hired were always much smarter. And I always said they're really smart, good looking, and impossible to manage.
What was the size of your initial team?
The initial team, I don't know, we kept growing. It was small in the beginning. It was like, hire 1 and then 2 and then 5 and then 10.
What was the size of your final team before you sold?
We were in 7 cities in the US, but it was still quite small. It was under 50 employees. So
Wow.
we set up an office in San Francisco with 2 or 3 people, the same in New York, Chicago.
As the company was scaling, as the company was growing, you'd grab a client and you'd hope to get the next client. And like, was there a really big moment as the company was developing where you thought to yourself, holy cow, we're going to do this. We're about to take off.
I think it was more like ebbs and flows, So what happens is it's sales, 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 and then, oh my God, how are we going to handle this? And then it's full on operations. And then, oh shoot, we've spent so much time on operations, I'm looking at the revenue for the following year, time to sell. And so it was really more like that than one big massive breakthrough moment. I mean, certainly we had some times that were really, really pinnacle for us, Coca-Cola in Salt Lake City, that was massive, in terms of their big events where they flew in their bottlers from all over the world and being able to, it was a privilege to do everything we could to make sure that coveted brand for Coca-Cola was represented in the most stellar way, most beautiful and most creative way possible at the games. It was a responsibility, really more than just our work. It was the client's work that we were just fulfilling in our own creative way.
I want to talk to you about your preparation for these big level meetings. I mean, you're talking about meeting with Coca-Cola and larger companies. And so you must have some boardrooms where you're the show and you got to go in there and sing and dance and do your thing and get the sale or do the work. How do you prepare for those meetings? Do you get nervous? I know meditation's part of your practice. Do you use meditation? What is your philosophy when it comes to big tasks and getting it done and selling people?
Well, really, it's about giving them what they want. in a unique way. So yeah, of course, I would get nervous, and I still get nervous. But it's funny when you look at it. Now we have digital and AI, and it's just so different. AI has changed the whole game. I mean, really, literally, back in the very beginning, we would actually, my creative team would actually build three-dimensional models to show what something was going to look like. You don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
But yeah, they were. So to answer your question, if I always put myself in the mindset of who I was presenting to, and most of the time at work, there were a couple funny times when it didn't work. One time, the NFL commissioners party back then was the most expensive event on the planet.
Sure.
It was ours to lose. But the presentation was 2 days after the close of the Olympic Games in Atlanta. And we had some serious things that happened behind the scenes. We were all working really 17 straight days with very little break. And then I had to come up to New York to make the presentation to the committee. So that was kind of an egoed out committee, to be honest, you can imagine. And so it was going quite well, I thought. And then they said, well, how do you see this particular aspect of the event? And I just went blank and said, may I get back to you on that? And I just thought that was just such a pathetic, still to this day, I'm so mad at myself for not co-dancing that one. And we didn't get it. So, and I don't like losing. So
Right.
I guess the lesson is you have to have you asked a question about your own personal vibe and energy, and I was depleted. So make sure that you've got enough energy to do the job.
Before we move on to Buddhism as a leadership skill, which I know that you've written about, I want to talk to you a little bit about AI, the incorporation of AI into the current day landscape. First of all, how do you use it as a tool if you use it? And then how do you see it influencing the business moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm obsessed with AI. I can't get enough of it because it's going to touch everything. And so it's essential. It's essential that every person that's serious about their career embrace it as best they can. So at genconnectU, we already have a series or a bundle of courses around AI, and it's just getting started. We have 7 amazing courses already. Well, we'll go into studio. Each course is 25, 30 grand to just produce. So we want to find the best of the best in a specific field.
Of course.
Since AI is so early days still, finding the right people to film and share their knowledge and wisdom around a topic as important as AI, and also to create content that's got, scale and make sure it's evergreen and, isn't dated in 6 months. And that's a big challenge with AI too. I think one of the courses, believe it or not, that is really going to be, I think, so fantastic is just the fundamentals of AI on prompting. Now, that's one that I'm still thinking, okay, maybe the shelf life is going to be shorter, obviously, than anything more theoretical. But I think this particular expert, his name is Ronsley Vaz, he's brilliant. He basically says that only about 10% of corporate America knows how to prompt.
Wow.
That's so interesting
Meaning what?
to me.
Meaning what?
To get the answers they need from the AI tool.
Okay.
So he shares how to do that. Then we have one by Gopi Kalil, he's the head of all strategy for AI for Google. And so he talks about it from as a leader. How do you implement AI, and how do you make sure that it's being used throughout, your company and in your teams effectively and in a collaborative way? So yeah, I think we're just getting started, and I just wish I was about 25 years old so I could start all over with.
It's interesting as you bring that up. I have worked on it. So I'm a business executive, sold a company, et cetera now. And I have a podcast. I teach college courses, and I do a lot of different things to keep myself engaged. And it was very interesting for me because ChatGPT showed up in the middle of one of my classes. And all of a sudden, I had to figure out how I'm going to use this within the world of education. And as you talk about prompting and queries, et cetera, at first it was A threat in a way, because you just didn't know what to make out of it. But to your point, I very quickly learned that there's so much value here and the students have to know how to use this stuff, that I began to work it into my curriculum, where the individual projects I kind of wanted them to do on their own to learn the fundamentals. But for the team stuff, I wanted them to work with it and to learn how to create the greatest business pitches and presentations possible, because that's the real world. Like, we have to accept the fact that it's here. You have to embrace it and really become a master of it in order to succeed. It's just such an exciting time.
Yeah, I think that's right in education, especially in the universities. And we can use Fordham as the example. The landmine for a student, I think, and I don't know if you found this or not, Larry, is that to use it as a crutch as opposed to a tool to expand their own mind.
Exactly.
I can tell you, like at my daughter's university at Fordham in the law school, those professors can tell within one sentence if it's AI written or not.
Oh, yeah. I could tell immediately. I took a kid into the hallway and had a very serious conversation with him.
That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, it's because it's such early days, there's that temptation, but it's also, so how to learn it, how to use it the right way as it continues to proliferate every week.
So, you touched upon genconnectU. We want to dig more into that, obviously, going forward. But there's a topic that I really want, and we really want to explore while we have you. So, Buddhism is something that is very important to you, and you have written about it. You've talked about how it has played a meaningful role throughout your career. And I have a few different questions. I'll start with, when did you discover Buddhism and how did it come onto your radar screen?
I became a serious practitioner about 25 years ago, but I was dabbling in it. I was almost spiritual window shopping. I alluded to the fact that, Catholicism wasn't resonating. So I window shopped for a while and looked at various, Hinduism and meditation and TM and all of these different things. But Buddhism, there was a great teacher. Her name's Pema Chodron. She was a third grade school teacher who her husband was cheating on her, and she left him and started studying with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche brought Buddhism to North America. He was genius. And so there's a place called the Shambhala Mountain Center, which is in Red Feather Lakes, Colorado. And it has the largest stupa in North America. It's huge. So I went there because Pema Chodron was teaching a course. So I went to basically connect with Pema Chodra. Just never looked back. It was just an old shoe as soon as I stepped foot on their property. And I think the best thing I can say about Buddhism is that it's ubiquitous. But the truth of the matter is that fundamentally it's just about basic goodness. And so you can take those principles, just that whole mindset of basic goodness, and it touches everything you do. Everything you do. And you can catch yourself when you're not coming from a space of basic goodness, which we all do from time to time. It's interesting. It almost can finish your breath and it finishes your sentences, and it lives in the thought of an awakened heart or doing the right thing really begins to permeate every decision you make in life. I can't wait for that to happen for me, by the way.
Yeah, right? I just, I want to talk about the juxtaposition of Buddhism and business, because I think sometimes in business we have this feeling that you're out for power or money or something glorious like that. And so to ground yourself in Buddhism, which, as you said, comes from a place of goodness, and I don't at all pretend to know any of the major tenets of Buddhism. I think sometimes we think we know what it is. But as you said, you're studying and practicing, and you're just touching on things right now that, you have a world to explore. But how do you juxtapose maybe a feeling of somewhat selfishness trying to achieve something in the business world with being grounded in a place of goodness in Buddhism?
Without getting too deep in it. So Chogyam Trungpa used to say, generosity is the virtue that produces peace. And so I break that down to what I would say to my children when they were young. If you want to be miserable, think of yourself. If you want to be happy, think of others. And that's kind of really where it starts. And so if you go full circle back to the question that I hadn't even thought of in 15, 20 years that Larry asked about, how do you get business? How do you network? How do you walk into it's the same thing. If you're thinking about what the outcome is for the other person, the person that's actually paying or that's working for you, or that's the recipient, the consumer, it makes it so much easier. And so I think that's how you can kind of thread this awakened heart all the way through everything you do. And it just comes from a space of generosity. Now, there is a thing called idiot compassion. And that's basically where you're not on edge, you're just constantly a doormat. And that's definitely not helpful. No one learns from that and you get stamped on. There is a balance between being on cue in terms of checking yourself, in terms of what the goal is, but always coming back to what the actual value behind that goal is and what you really want to get out of it and how it's impacting everything and everyone that goal would touch. And that comes from that awakened heart mentality.
So then how does Buddhism define success? And I'm not just talking about personal success in that sense, but let's say, how does Buddhism play into the notion of business success?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, is it making a healthy, positive impact on the world? Is the outcome positive and how is it impacting other people? I really think the world would be so much a better place if it would be simplified and it wouldn't be all about me. I really do think that companies that are great are companies that really think about how this is going to impact the world. But there's Hinayana, which are the basic rules, like the Ten Commandments. And then there's Mahayana, which is awakened heart. And that's the notion of compassion. And then there's Vajrayana, which is the fusion of wisdom and compassion. But Buddha 9 to 5 was written around Hinayana. So I took the Eightfold Path and I found case studies of companies that were doing one of those 8 things right in business. That's what kind of created the whole notion around that book. So it would be like right vision, right mission. So if you look at like right action, Mark Benioff, when he started Salesforce, put a meditation room in their first building.
Right.
Wow.
And he could do that because he owned the company. So I think that's an example of taking the right action to impact his employees, who would then go in there if they needed to meditate, clear the thoughts, go climb into the space between the thoughts, and then they could come back with a better outcome for their customers. So it's a definitely 3-circle awakened heart theory.
So if that's the case, then it seems like the philosophy in many cases that you're looking to make a positive impact, whether it be for your clients or just for just in general. And then I'm assuming then after that, it's the notion of the byproduct of that is financial success.
It could be, and it could not be. I mean, it doesn't have to be. Let's put
Right.
that should just be the icing.
Or does it even come into play?
It has to, because without money, you can't make impact at some point.
Sure.
Right. So it is kind of like a push-pull, but it's really what the intention is. What the intention is, even with the money. We see the dark side of that every day in the news. We don't want to go there. So that's when you go back to the whole idea around leadership. And it's funny we're having this conversation. It's exciting to me because Rick Murray, who I mentioned, that was actually the one that found my first company, CEM, and convinced IPG to buy it. He just reached out to me recently to say, hey, let's write a book on conscious leadership. And what's interesting is that at genconnectU, we created another organization within the company called the Leadership Skills Institute, and it's based on the premises of conscious leadership. So, and there are 8 C's. So, because I like the number 8. To answer your question, none of those 8 C's actually directly relate to the pathway of making money. But ultimately,
Interesting.
If they're integrated, you will make money without even thinking about it.
Sure.
As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about the word ego. So in what could be a competitive environment in the world of business where you're trying to get the deal and position things in the right way, et cetera, et cetera. And as people are trying to climb the ladder and as you navigate hierarchy and things of that nature, ego, I imagine, comes into play in some way. And I believe that a big part of Buddhism is moving beyond the ego. So I'm curious, like having run a company and having managed people, have you dealt with ego as a challenge that needs to be managed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, even doing this podcast with you guys, I do not like talking about myself. I like talking about the other person. We used to say I can't remember the name of the buyers. There were 4 buyers, but one was always about ego. You'd see up their awards on the wall when you walked in, and you knew right off the bat. They were actually the easiest ones to crack because you just started talking about themselves. And really, I would say that I've gotten worse at dealing with that. Let me break it down. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of dancing with someone, let's say in high school, and the person that you're dancing with is looking over your shoulder to see who else they could dance with. It's kind of like that in the big girl world. So Davos, the World Economic Forum, is not comfortable for me, but I go every year because I have to.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about. I plunge myself into situations where there's a lot of ego in the room. And what I do is just break it down and say, okay, that person who owns this is the CEO of the largest bank in the world, goes home to the same kind of things that I go home to.
Yeah.
Maybe with a little bit of a different balance sheet than I have. But at the end of the day, they are a human being. And if you look them in the eye and smile and don't let your own ego get in the way of that connection, it's not that hard.
Interesting.
It seems like a perfect time to bring it up because you're talking about your spirituality. You mentioned your children before, but you're the boss. You're the big boss. Like, how do you handle that work-life balance? How do you find time for meditation and spirituality? How do you find time for your children? Because you have, I'm sure, a plethora to-do list that has to get done on a day-to-day basis. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I'm not good at that. I mean, I work a lot. I still work a lot, but I think there's discipline and doing the things that you're important. So when you do your goals, like every year for the last, 40 years, I've written my goals for the next year, and I have 7 of them because I break my life down into silos. And sometimes I hit the goals in the silos and sometimes I don't. You revisit those goals at least once a month, check in to see how you're doing, just keep pushing on. But it is discipline. And if you have the secret sauce for that one, I'd love to know it.
Nope.
Let's move now to genconnectU, and I want to get the idea. I want to get from you, like, what was the genesis behind it? Now, I think part of it comes from your own love of learning, which you said you had when you were from very young till now. This want to learn. What was the genesis behind genconnectU?
Yeah, so initially it was a media company. I was in Aspen. I was with a close dear friend named Kitty Boone, who was running the Aspen Ideas Festival. That was early days. I said, how are we going to capture the wisdom of all these brilliant people that are coming on campus and, keep it on a shelf and share it? And so we started out just interviewing. It was just called Gen Connect, not genconnectU. And we do 40 or 50 interviews in 4 days. I mean,
Wow.
everybody, like it was,
My God.
yeah. And incredible people. I mean, people like Reid Hoffman, when he was just starting early days with LinkedIn, and
Liz Caplow, who we've had on this program
Liz
before.
Caplow, she is fantastic. I didn't have the privilege of meeting her until a few years back with the New York Women in Communications about 6 years ago or something like that. But anyway, then we built up, this huge library of content. And I said, what are we going to do with this? Because it can't monetize. I mean, I was distributing and syndicating content at the New York Times and
Hmm.
a lot of Hearst and Meredith, and we weren't making enough money to keep the doors open. And so I started looking like, where is the need? Where's the traction going to be? And e-learning was just happening. LinkedIn a few years earlier had bought lynda.com, and which after that, Microsoft bought LinkedIn. So yeah, we just said, okay, let's explore this online learning industry. And it's really taken off, online learning. As you know, Masterclass wasn't around then, but then Coursera came onto the picture, Udemy, and ourselves. And we really were not anywhere near the size of any of those companies, but our product, we take a lot of pride in the product to make sure that it's not user-generated content. Not that there's anything wrong with user-generated content, but we made the decision to let's produce content that people will want to watch again and again and again.
And how do you exactly pick this up, the people who are going to present these subjects? Is it a team of people? Do you have last say on who's going to give that? I won't use the word masterclass because I know that that's part of that. But how do you go about choosing the people?
Yeah, it's a great question too. So my content team actually will vet it, and then they'll come to me and we'll say, okay, let's look at, the schedule. Let's look at, give me the data, give me the trends, why this person over that person. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, we're on a real quest to expand the library around AI content. So that comes first. And then it goes back to just like the sales process. It's a networking. You meet one person, they say, oh, you should definitely, interview my partner in crime, this.
Fascinating. Real quick, best thing about being the boss?
Not being a boss.
Okay. Because my next question is worst thing about being a boss?
Being the boss.
Fair answers.
Yeah, it's just hard to have to make tough decisions every now and then, That's when the going gets tough, that's when you differentiate yourself between being a compassionate person and an idiot, trying to practice compassion. You have to really sometimes make tough decisions that are not fun. If you go back to the pure intention, who's going to suffer if I don't make this decision? It gets a lot easier.
And very quickly, what's a typical day look like for you, or is there no typical day? I always like to ask that to powerful people.
I always try and get a workout in, do something, whether
Discipline.
It's a long walk
There you go.
yeah. And then I definitely practice for 20 minutes. Usually the day is already filled. And then you hit the treadmill running.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So you've had an incredible journey. You have seen so many different things. You've now met so many incredible people through genconnectU. I'm curious. We talked about AI. We talked about students previously. You have children who are in their 20s. Advice for a young person. What would you tell somebody who is entering the work world now? What are some of the key things you've learned that could help them?
Definitely. We had an interview with Madeleine Albright. That was such a loss when we lost her. And we asked her that question, and her answer is one that just stuck with me forever. And it was this simple: there's never a stupid question. So because the guy that was working for me said, this is going to be a question that's beneath you, and she just stopped him dead in his tracks. And I'll never forget that, because I think that is the number one rule, is that don't be so shy to ask the question.
You did. That's great advice. Never be afraid to ask a question.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, I'm glad that we asked you the question today to come join our podcast. That'll be my hokey shtick at the end as we work our way towards the exit. But genconnectU is the company, the platform, the website that everybody should check out.
Thank you.
I had a chance to scroll through there. There were a lot of familiar names of people who I've crossed paths with in my career, which I found pretty interesting. But Nancy, you're an inspiration. You're so creative. The way that you bring Buddhism into the real world is just unique and something that I think we can all learn from. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's so kind of all of you to have me. Thank you very much. It was really fun.
So that was Nancy Spears of genconnectU. And I often feel like I lead into our wrap-up segment talking about how the person was dynamic or interesting or inspiring. And this just felt a little bit different. This felt like a really unique conversation that we haven't really had before, with spirituality, a different type of depth that we've really never explored before. This was just fascinating. Larry Shea, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, I have so many takeaways. It was such a serious conversation, such an adult conversation, I think is where to start, because she had so many great nuggets to chew on about life and career and choices. And I think it all comes down to her curiosity of knowledge, her determination, her tenacity. There's so much there. But I was surprised to learn that she said she was shy as a child. Like, you don't get that impression now when you listen to her speak. There's this level of confidence, and it really permeates in how she carries herself, certainly with us, but I'm sure in her career as well. So I was really taken by that. And the level of success right out of the gate with starting her own company and the Olympic sponsors and that whole thing. She really seemed like she had a great handle on what it takes to be successful. I also was taken by how she prepares for meetings. She admits she gets nervous. She admits that it's a tall task, but they did things differently back when she started than how they do them now. She talks about the importance of AI and preparation, but back then they would build 3D models and stuff like that, you know? Pretty fascinating, just the way business has changed. But I think what permeates the entire interview for me is how tenacious she is and how determined she was to not just be successful, but to be uber successful and to give back and to do it in a certain way, you know, with Buddhism at the root. And it's just, you're right, Larry. It was something we really hadn't covered before, and I was impressed.
Yeah, let me follow on that, Shay, and just say, I appreciated her candidness. I appreciated her seriousness, because, you know, we try to have fun with all of our guests, but, you know, maybe once in a while, what we need is someone to kind of just, you know, no nonsense discussion sometimes, right? Her inquisitiveness is what really, really struck me, is that, you know, she enjoys learning, and genconnectU is very much an outcropping of that desire. She was great. In my opinion, she really was great, because she really, really gave you a no-nonsense view of her ability to make it in the business world. The incorporation of AI and the idea, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. She's going all in on this, right? She's understanding that, look, this is the way of the future. And if you don't change with the times will change you, right? That's basically it. And then I think she quoted Madeleine Albright about the notion of no stupid questions, right? Well, I have my own version of that. There are no stupid questions. It's only stupid not to ask questions, really. That's really basically it.
It's perfect.
And I really, really appreciated Nancy's honesty and her seriousness when thinking about these questions. I'm glad we were able to kind of bring out some nuggets from her that you hadn't really thought about over the course of her career. None of us really do. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. She is successful for a reason, and she pointed that out.
Absolutely. And, you know, as I mentioned off the top, the other aspect of this discussion was the spirituality and the humanity that she expressed. I mentioned during our conversation that at one time I ran a company that was founded by Buddhists, and it was an incredibly rewarding experience where that spirit and that soul was really at the core of the business. And it was so incredibly unique. And in some ways, it created some conflict in terms of creating structure and a competitive spirit with certain things, et cetera, et cetera. And it was something that I had to figure out how to navigate. But Nancy clearly has done that and has embraced that and has built her entire fabric, career, and business around Buddhism and spirituality. I mean, she's written a book, which is fascinating, called Buddha 9 to 5, where she brings a lot of that stuff out. So it just was such a unique look at how business can be, how business potentially should be. And I learned so much from this discussion.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that part of it too, because we did pose those questions to her. We think about business as you're trying to achieve and conquer, and she
very cutthroat, right?
Yeah, and she bases it all in being centered and giving back and coming from a place of love rather than a place of ruthlessness. And that was just
Right.
it's so
Like
important.
that notion of I rather, or that notion of we rather than I. Right.
Absolutely.
Which is sort of an interesting thing to bring up because, as a very experienced business person, I've always believed that I has no role. When you're working out a partnership, when you're working out a deal, when you're building upon a long-term relationship, it's all about having a two-way street and no ego, and everybody should win and everybody should be gaining something. That's what successful business is. And I find it interesting that sometimes people think about it differently. But successful business is collaboration and working together. And that's really what Buddhism, to a certain degree or a small degree, is about. So I just found the whole thing fascinating. So for anybody out there, if you'd like to learn more about Nancy, the name of her platform, which is so great, is called genconnectU. It brings experts together and really to us in a way that we can learn so much and gain incredible insights into stuff that, isn't always available. So with that, Nancy Spears, thank you so much for joining us.
We also thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our conversation, please support No Wrong Choices by following us wherever you're listening right now. You can also join our growing community by connecting with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, or by visiting NoWrongChoices.com for great additional content. On behalf of Larry Shea, Tushar Saxena, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again for joining us.